The chandeliers of the Marchioness of Penberry's ballroom glowed like suspended suns, each crystal facet catching candlelight and scattering it in glittering shards that danced across silk gowns and polished floors. Music swelled, laughter fluttered, and the air shimmered with the practiced elegance of London's winter season. Yet none of its brilliance could disguise the subtle cruelty woven into every glance. Clara Harwood stood near a column draped in white roses, her gloved hands folded neatly before her, hoping to appear invisible. She had perfected invisibility over the years. It spared her the disappointment of being seen and instantly dismissed. Tonight was no different. The baronet approached her with the bright eagerness of a man in search of conquest, and for a breath she allowed herself to imagine he meant to ask her for a dance. Instead, he bowed only long enough to be polite before saying, "Miss Harwood, forgive me. Have you seen your sister Lydia? I was promised the next set." His eyes sparkled with expectation, as though Lydia's whereabouts were a puzzle only Clara could solve. She pointed him toward the far corner, murmuring that her sister was surrounded by admirers. He thanked her with the cheerful unawareness usually reserved for young men who believe the world turns for their convenience, then hurried away. The moment he left, the air around her grew colder. In truth, Clara had not expected his attention, yet the faint hope stung all the same. Hope always stung the most. She retreated further into the room's periphery, blending into the quiet where discarded conversation settled like dust. From here she could see everything without being part of anything. Her elder sister Lydia, golden and resplendent in a gown trimmed with pearls, glided through admirers like a swan through calm waters. Marianne, the youngest, laughed brightly, her mahogany curls bouncing as two officers argued for her attention. Their gowns were new. Clara's had been remade from one worn 2 seasons ago. Her family's carriage, though polished, needed repairs. Their father's study door remained locked more often now, concealing stacks of letters and his drawn face. Yet society saw none of this. The Harwood sisters were still considered a respectable trio, beautiful, charming, and in the case of 2 of them, unquestionably desirable prospects. Clara's own reputation was different. She was the steady one, the dependable one, the sister who listened, poured tea, and smoothed quarrels. If she possessed beauty, it was of such quiet persuasion that only candlelight noticed it. And candlelight, regrettably, had no influence over suitors. She touched the small notebook hidden within her reticule, the one she carried to every ball. Inside were sketches of gowns, her secret indulgence, the one place where she felt bold. She had drawn Lydia's blue dress earlier that evening, adjusting the bodice, altering the trim. Fashion never replied rudely, never compared her to her sisters. It simply yielded to her pencil with graceful obedience. But though she dreamed of becoming a designer, daughters of respectable families did not work, not openly. Dreams, like Clara herself, were expected to remain quiet. A soft current of murmurs drifted across the ballroom, subtle at first, then building with unmistakable excitement. Clara turned her head slightly. Even those engrossed in conversation paused, lifting their eyes toward the grand entrance as footmen straightened. A ripple of anticipation ran through the room like a shiver. "The Duke of Ashcombe has arrived," someone whispered behind her. The name alone carried weight enough to alter the evening. The Duke had returned from diplomatic service in Vienna only weeks earlier, and already society had woven him into every conversation. Young ladies angled their bodies toward the doorway. Mothers straightened posture. Even married women pretended not to look while looking all the same. Clara's sisters had been discussing him nonstop. How Lydia would make the perfect duchess. How Marianne's vivacity would charm him instantly. Clara had merely listened, knowing her role in such discussions was to offer encouragement, not participation. She did not lift her chin when the Duke entered. The first rule of invisibility was not to break it with hope. Yet she could feel the shift in the atmosphere as definitively as if the floor itself had tilted. Applause rose politely as the Marchioness greeted him. Clara caught only a glimpse of his black coat, cut precisely to accentuate his tall frame, before she lowered her eyes again. A group of ladies brushed past her, fanning themselves dramatically. One said, "He is even more handsome than rumor promised." Another added, "Surely Lydia Harwood will aim for him tonight." Or perhaps Marianne. Their laughter chimed softly, kind, even admiring. Yet it reminded Clara that her sisters belonged to a world she observed only from the edges. She shifted her position, intending to move toward the refreshment table. Crowds pressed forward, and she did not wish to be caught in the tide. As she turned, her gaze flickered upward for the smallest fraction of a moment. The Duke of Ashcombe was looking directly at her. The connection was brief, a brush of recognition, so startling she almost doubted its reality. His expression was unreadable from across the ballroom, yet something in it, curiosity, perhaps, or intent, sent a tremor through her. She dropped her eyes at once, her breath catching. Why would a man of his status look at her? Surely it was a coincidence, a trick of perception. He must have been searching for someone behind her. Foolish to imagine otherwise. Lydia moved toward the Duke with perfect timing, offering a graceful curtsy. The two exchanged words Clara could not hear. Marianne hovered nearby, ready to charm. It was the natural order of things. Beauty recognized beauty, status gravitated toward status, and the quiet middle sister remained where the light did not quite reach. And yet the Duke did not remain with Lydia. After a few moments of polite conversation, he stepped aside, surveying the ballroom with sharp, discerning eyes. His gaze passed over groups of ladies, through clusters of officers, across gossiping matrons, and returned unmistakably to where Clara stood. She felt it before she met it. A warmth, a pressure, a sensation like being pulled into awareness. She lifted her head despite herself. Again, his eyes were fixed on her, not idly, not accidentally, but with a deliberateness she could not interpret. Clara's heart thudded once, sharply, then fell into a rhythm she could not control. Never in all her seasons had a man looked at her like that, with attention unclouded by comparison to her sisters. She glanced behind her to ensure he was not seeking someone else. The column, the roses, the wall, nothing but shadows. It was absurd, impossible. Yet he continued to look. Her instinct urged her to step away, to reclaim the safety of invisibility before she misread the moment and embarrassed herself. But her feet remained rooted, held by a force she could neither name nor resist. A shift in the crowd blocked her view. When it cleared, the Duke was no longer where he stood. He was walking toward her. Not toward Lydia, who called his name with soft surprise. Not toward Marianne, who fluttered her fan with bright encouragement. His steps were firm, unhesitant, directed entirely at Clara. The room seemed to tighten, every sound dimming except the steady rhythm of his shoes crossing the polished floor. Clara felt heat rise along her neck, confusion battling instinctive fear. Nothing in her world had prepared her for the possibility, however fleeting, that a man of such rank would choose to approach her. Just before he reached her, she felt her breath falter. He stopped a respectful distance away and inclined his head, observing her with a quiet intensity that made escape impossible. Time contracted, the ballroom shrinking to a single point, the Duke standing before the girl no one ever noticed. Clara's world, carefully constructed from predictability and quiet endurance, shifted beneath her feet. And though she could not yet understand why, a certainty formed with startling clarity that whatever happened next would change the course of her season, perhaps even her life. The Duke's presence unsettled Clara long after he left her side that night, though she scarcely understood what had been said between them. His greeting had been courteous, his questions surprisingly gentle, and yet his attention carried a weight she could neither dismiss nor explain. For days she replayed every moment as though deciphering a riddle, wondering whether he had simply been in a gracious mood or whether she had imagined the subtle warmth in his gaze. Her sisters insisted he had merely been surveying the room. Lydia claimed he was searching for an equal, not a shadow. Marianne suggested he must have mistaken Clara for someone else. Their certainty forced Clara back into the quiet corners of herself, where doubt thrived like ivy. The masquerade hosted by the Duchess of Rexford arrived with a flourish of crimson velvet draperies, gold masks, and musicians dressed as Roman gods. Guests drifted through winding hallways lit by hundreds of candles, their laughter echoing off marble floors. Masquerades held a peculiar magic. Anonymity encouraged boldness, and boldness often fermented scandal. Clara had no intention of drawing attention, which was precisely why she chose a modest lavender mask trimmed only with a ribbon of silver. Her gown had been altered once more from Marianne's old one, its hem let out, its sleeves reworked. She preferred it that way. The gown felt familiar, like a friend who made no demands. She positioned herself near a balcony overlooking the garden, where the night lay cool and quiet. Her heart settled in the solitude, content to watch the whirl of dancers from afar. She traced the curve of a gown in her mind, imagining how she might redesign it, when a sudden hush fell over the nearest guests. Clara did not look up immediately. She assumed a prominent family had entered or a famous soprano had been announced. But the silence grew thicker, stretching toward her like a ripple through still water. She turned. The Duke of Ashcombe stood in the doorway, his mask a simple black one that revealed more than it hid. His eyes scanned the room with deliberate intention. When they found her, Clara felt the air catch in her throat. There was no mistaking it now. He was looking directly at her, and the effect was so profound she instinctively took a half step back. He approached through the crowd with the confident stride of a man accustomed to parting seas. Guests moved aside for him without being asked, mesmerized by the quiet authority he carried like a mantle. Clara's pulse quickened, absurdly aware of how plain her gown must appear beside the richly embroidered dresses surrounding her. She willed herself not to shrink. She had nothing to offer him, no beauty, no wealth, no enchanting charm, but she still possessed dignity, and she clung to it like a lifeline. When he reached her, he lifted a hand and removed his mask. She could not fathom why the gesture felt so intimate. He inclined his head and said in a voice meant for her alone, "I wondered if you might be persuaded to grant me a moment." She hesitated only long enough to find her voice. "Your Grace, I fear I am not the lady you intended to approach." His answer was immediate, unwavering. "On the contrary, Miss Harwood, I came for you, not them." The words struck her with disarming force. She wanted to believe him, yet disbelief rose instinctively, habitual, protective. Still, she allowed him to lead her to the edge of the dance floor, where the music softened into a slow, graceful piece. The Duke placed one hand lightly at her waist, the other guiding her gloved fingers. His touch was impeccably polite, yet she felt it through every layer of fabric. They moved as though they had been dancing together for years, not seconds. "You avoid me," he said quietly, as though stating a fact rather than an accusation. "I do not wish to draw attention," she replied. "People talk. People always talk," he said. "It is a habit they mistake for purpose." The faintest smile touched her lips at his phrasing. She dared to lift her gaze, meeting his eyes fully for the first time. They were darker up close, thoughtful, touched with something she could not name. Curiosity, perhaps, or recognition. But society did talk. Clara heard whispers swirling like smoke around them. Her sisters watched from across the room, Lydia with rigid posture, Marianne with open astonishment. Clara tensed, but the Duke's hand steadied her with the slightest pressure. When the dance ended, he escorted her to a small alcove where lantern light pooled in gentle halos. From his coat, he withdrew a slender object wrapped in linen. "I must give you something," he said. "A token, if you will permit it." She frowned, taken aback. "Your Grace, I cannot accept gifts. It would be improper." "Impropriety lies in intent," he replied. "Allow me to explain mine." He unwrapped the item carefully, revealing a pencil of fine quality, carved with delicate Viennese motifs. Clara's breath hitched. A common lady might not recognize such craftsmanship, but Clara, who spent countless hours sketching, knew immediately how rare it was. "For your drawings," he said softly. She stared, astonished. "But how did you know?" "I noticed many things others overlook." The words landed with quiet significance, more intimate than any endearment. She accepted the pencil reluctantly, fear and gratitude warring within her. Accepting it meant acknowledging his attention was real. And acknowledging it meant hope. Hope, she knew, was dangerous. Before she could speak, laughter erupted nearby, sharp, cutting laughter that carried the unmistakable edge of mockery. Clara recognized the voices. Two young ladies known for gossip more than grace. Their glances were pointed, their whispers unmistakable. The scandal was already forming. The plain Harwood girl receiving a personal gift from a duke. How improper. How presumptuous. How shocking. Heat rushed to Clara's cheeks. She tried to return the pencil. He gently pressed it back into her hand. "Do not let them wound you," he said. "Their words cannot diminish what is genuine." "But they can ruin reputations," she whispered. "Then allow mine to shield yours." The promise unsettled her more than the gift itself. Her mind spun with warnings taught since childhood. Warnings about impropriety, about illusion, about men whose attentions were fleeting. She stepped back, overwhelmed. "I must go," she said, her voice trembling despite her efforts. "My family will wonder where I am." He let her go, but his gaze lingered with a resolve she did not understand. As she left the alcove, she felt eyes following her, some curious, some envious, many disbelieving. Lydia intercepted her almost immediately. "What have you done?" Lydia hissed. "Half the room is talking." "It was nothing," Clara said, breathless. "He simply wished to return something I dropped." "You dropped a Viennese pencil?" Marianne asked skeptically. "Clara, truly, what is happening?" Clara could offer no explanation. She slipped away before they could press her further, her heart pounding as the music swelled behind her. She found refuge near a tall column draped in ivy, but the safety was illusory. Every whisper seemed magnified. Every glance felt accusing. When she left the ball that night, her thoughts churned so fiercely that sleep abandoned her. She tucked the pencil into a drawer, unable to look at it without feeling as though her world were tilting into unfamiliar territory. The following afternoon, as she prepared for another round of social calls, a footman delivered a parcel addressed in elegant handwriting. Clara's pulse quickened. She opened it cautiously. Inside lay her sketchbook, the worn cover replaced with soft, finely bound leather. Beneath it, a note. "Your art deserves to be seen." There was no signature, but none was needed. Her fingers trembled as she traced the new binding. A mix of fear and exhilaration swept through her, sharp and consuming. Someone had witnessed her quietest passion and chosen to honor it. Someone she had no business thinking about. As she closed the box, a shadow moved across the doorway. Someone had been watching. Someone who now understood her secret was not so secret anymore. And Clara realized, with startling clarity, that her season had taken a turn she could neither predict nor control. Clara had never feared her own heartbeat before, yet in the days following the parcel's arrival, its every quickened rhythm felt like a betrayal. She hid the newly bound sketchbook beneath her mattress, terrified that Lydia or Marianne might discover it and unearth a truth she herself barely understood. The Duke's note lingered in her thoughts with dangerous tenderness, the ink imprinted on her memory as sharply as on the page. She told herself to forget it, to dismiss the gesture as an act of noble generosity, nothing more. Yet the care he had taken, the precise stitching of the leather, the way the pages had been straightened, felt designed for her alone. She attempted distraction, forcing herself into the routines of the season, but every ballroom became an echo chamber of speculation. She could feel eyes on her wherever she went, measuring her worth, weighing her intentions, searching for impropriety where none existed. And always, always she sensed him. The frost fair on the frozen Thames offered a brief escape from the rigid confines of drawing rooms and parlors. Stalls selling spice cakes dotted the ice, musicians played lively reels, and lanterns glowed with soft amber light that painted the river in flickering hues. Clara walked with her mother and sisters, clutching her muff tightly. The cold air bit at her cheeks, but it was a welcome bite, brisk, clean, nothing like the hot whisper of gossip that had smothered her all week. Lydia and Marian glided between vendors, chattering with renewed confidence. They believed the Duke had come to his senses. They believed his attention had shifted elsewhere. Clara wished she believed it too. As she paused near a booth displaying carved figurines, a familiar voice brushed her ear, sending a shiver down her spine. "Miss Harwood." She turned slowly. The Duke stood mere steps away, his coat dusted with frost, his expression composed but softened by a warmth that made her breath falter. Her mother and sisters were distracted several yards off, immersed in examining ribbons. Clara's pulse surged with dread and longing, each emotion pulling her in opposite directions. She should have walked away. She should have fled before he could speak again. Yet she remained rooted, unable to break the invisible thread between them. He inclined his head. "May I accompany you for a moment?" She hesitated, glancing toward her family. He understood instantly. "I shall keep a proper distance, if you prefer. Only grant me the chance to speak." His deference disarmed her. She nodded, and they began walking along the lantern-lit stretch of ice, careful not to draw notice. The sounds of the fair filled the silence at first, children laughing, skates scraping, vendors calling their wares. When he finally spoke, his tone carried a sincerity that pierced through every defense she had constructed. "You avoid me again." She swallowed. "Not out of dislike, Your Grace." "Then why?" he asked. "Have I offended you?" His earnestness unsettled her more than arrogance would have. "Your attentions create complications," she said quietly. "My family, society, even my own mind, they all insist I must have misunderstood you." His steps slowed. "And what do you believe?" She had no answer. Her breath steamed in the cold as she searched for one, but all she found was fear. Not of him, never of him, but of what his presence might cost her. Finally she whispered, "Why offer kindness to a woman no one sees?" He stopped, turning to face her fully, the lanterns casting pale halos across his features. "Because," he said softly, "you are the only one who sees yourself as unseen." His words struck something raw within her, a place she had guarded since girlhood. She felt her composure falter. He continued, "I noticed you months ago, your restraint, your thoughtfulness, the quiet way you study the world. And I recognize someone who observes because she has been taught not to participate." She lowered her gaze, overwhelmed by a mixture of gratitude and disbelief. "You ascribe me virtues I do not possess." "No," he replied firmly. "I merely acknowledge the ones others overlook." She wanted to hold on to his words, to let them soothe every ache of invisibility she had endured. Yet fear tightened around her heart. Visibility came at a price, and she did not know whether she could pay it. Before she could speak again, footsteps crunched behind them. Lydia's voice, sharp with suspicion, cut through the moment. "Clara, there you are." Lydia glanced between them, her expression sharpening with instantaneous comprehension. "Your Grace," she said with brittle sweetness, "how fortunate that you should find my sister alone." Clara stepped back, instinctively distancing herself. "We were just walking," she said quickly. Lydia's gaze cooled. "How innocent." The Duke's expression darkened with disapproval, but Lydia pressed on before he could speak. "Mother is waiting. Clara, come." Clara obeyed, but not before the Duke said, in a low voice meant only for her, "This is not the end of our conversation." Her heart thrummed with equal parts dread and longing as she allowed Lydia to lead her back toward the crowd. Lydia said little until they reached their mother, then seized her arm with quiet fury. "You must stop this. Whatever he thinks he feels, it will ruin us all if it becomes a spectacle." Clara murmured an apology she did not mean. She spent the rest of the fair hollowed by uncertainty, unable to shake the Duke's words or Lydia's warning. That evening's ball was held at Carlton House, the Prince Regent himself attending. Opulence dripped from every surface, mirrored walls, gilded columns, a ceiling painted like a twilight sky. Clara kept to the edges as she always did, hoping the night would pass without incident. But scandal traveled swiftly. She caught fragments of conversation, her name spoken with incredulous amusement, her character weighed by people who had never exchanged a word with her. Shame crawled beneath her skin. She wished she could disappear entirely. Then a sudden hush fell over the ballroom. Clara looked up to see the Duke stepping into the center of the floor, his posture commanding, his gaze sweeping the room before settling unerringly on her. A tremor ran through her. Without waiting for permission or invitation, he addressed the assembled guests with a clarity that silenced every whisper. "Allow me to dispel the nonsense circulating this evening," he said. "My admiration is not a rumor. It is an intention directed solely toward Miss Clara Harwood." The room exhaled in collective shock. Clara's hand flew to her mouth. Lydia's fan clattered to the ground. Marian gasped audibly. The Duke approached Clara, each step measured, resolute. When he reached her, he extended his hand with quiet certainty. She felt every eye upon them. Yet in that moment the world narrowed to the space between their hands. He spoke softly, for her alone. "You may choose to accept or refuse, but let the choice be yours, not society's." The tremor in her heart steadied. She placed her hand in his, knowing the path ahead would not be simple, but understanding, for the first time, that she was seen.